In late 1973, release of the horror movie The Exorcist shocked the world. As well as being groundbreaking cinema, its events were based on a true story, albeit it was subsequently outlawed in around 40 countries and even later banned on video in Britain for 12 years. 25 years after the release, one of the Jesuit priests who performed the exorcism came forward disclosing that he was one of the 3 who were involved in the 3-month battle to save a 14-year-old boy's soul from satanic possession. The then trainee priest, Father Halloran, had taken part in the real-life exorcism that became one of Hollywood's most terrifying films. In the film, the possessed child was a girl played by Blair, but in real life they were a boy called Douglas Deen. He lived with his working-class parents in Mount Rainier, Maryland, in the US. Douglas's ordeal started in 1948, soon after a much-loved aunt who liked to hold seances showed him how to use a Ouija board. At that stage, the family started to hear strange dripping noises in their home, while loud knocking sounds would wake them up at night. When Douglas's aunt died, he was devastated and he tried to contact her using the Ouija board. Halloran says that the boy then unwittingly made himself an easy mark for the spirit. In January 1949, the Deen family started to wonder if they had a plague of rats. Loud scratching noises, like fingernails on wood, were heard coming from the walls and upstairs attic of their house. Some even came from inside the boy's mattress, and his bed trembled. However, rodent exterminators could find no trace of the pests. The noises increased in intensity, disturbing the family's sleep, and were soon accompanied by the sound of creaking footsteps in the hallway. Then the real poltergeist haunting began, with dishes flying through the air, furniture moving unaided, a picture floating off the wall and then back again, and fruit flying out of a bowl and smashing itself on the walls and floor. A table splintered into hundreds of pieces. Within weeks, the family, now aware that they had this pernicious ghost, were at the point of nervous breakdown. But it was also obvious that the spirit was centering its activities around the Dean's 13-year-old son, Douglas. The bizarre phenomena only occurred when he was in the room, and when he was out of the house, they completely stopped. A chair Douglas was sitting on rose off the ground, tipping him out. A Bible flew from a bookcase and dropped at his feet. Every night, the boy would be gripped by seizures. Douglas's bed would shake and tremble even when he was fast asleep. According to Halloran, his bed linen would stand out straight from the bed. Douglas now cursed, ranted about demons, screamed and thrashed about. Bibles and holy water placed in attempts to protect him would fly across his room as he writhed wildly on the bed, shouting profanities and spewing bile. Scratches forming letters would appear on Douglas's body, and when the word Louis appeared to be written on the boy's skin, the family interpreted it as a sign to move to St. Louis, Missouri, where they had relatives. Regardless, the nightly seizures kept repeating. Douglas was taken to psychologists, psychiatrists, and doctors who all offered no solution. The distraught family sought assistance from their local minister, the Reverend Winston, who, although sceptical, invited Douglas to spend the night in his home, setting up a spare bed in his own bedroom. Douglas arrived at 9:20 on February 17th and went to bed at 10 p.m. Within minutes, his bed was vibrating and there were scratching noises coming from the wall. Winston quickly switched on the light and saw that the boy was lying perfectly still while his bed shook violently. He suggested that Douglas sleep in a large and very heavy armchair. Impossible to move, he thought, but as soon as the boy was settled there, the massive chair rolled back against the wall, then tilted until it ejected him onto the floor. Winston was so curious that he sat on and tried to tilt the chair himself, but found it impossible. Douglas had to finally sleep on a mattress on the floor, but this slid around the room all night, preventing sleep for either. The next day, Douglas went into the Georgetown Hospital, then a Catholic institution, for observation, while Winston gave a lecture at the Parapsychology Society about the amazing things he had witnessed. Deciding that Douglas was possessed by an entity, the hospital was unable to solve his problem, and although the family was Lutheran, called in the assistance of the Jesuits, specifically wanting a priest who specialised in exorcism or the casting out of evil spirits. Father Albert Hughes made an initial first attempt at an exorcism at Washington's Georgetown University. He soon gave up after Douglas freed one of his arms from restraints and slashed the priest's right arm with a jagged piece of bed spring he had managed to work loose. Father Hughes' wound required 100 stitches and he never regained the full use of his arm. As there was no let-up in the possession of Douglas, Father William Bowden, then 52, was summoned and he asked 26-year-old Halloran to drive him to the Dean's house. As Halloran walked into Douglas's bedroom, a bottle of holy water shot across the room and smashed into the wall. The boy's bed rocked violently as he cursed in a hoarse growl. Father Bowden undertook fasting and repeating exorcism rituals over Douglas. The ritual always ended in a command. I command you, whoever you are, unclean spirit, that by our Lord Jesus Christ you give me your name and the day of your exit. For weeks, these words had no effect at all, until one day Douglas is said to have started shrieking obscenities in a shrill voice and speaking rapidly in Latin, a language that he had never studied. Halloran, kneeling in prayer at the boy's bed, was told by Bowden to relax and keep praying. Bowden chanted his commands, which seemed ineffectual when later strange markings appeared on Douglas's body. Marks like arrows and the words hell or go appeared on his arms, chest, stomach and legs. Then the image of a bat or devil was seen on his skin. Halloran explained that an important aspect of exorcism is that all human or natural causes for the occurrence have to be exhausted, which was done. The exorcism ritual started with prayers in Latin, while the boy spewed streams of spit into the priest's faces, sometimes as much as half a pint, making the pea soup vomit in the film fairly accurate. Douglas would flick his tongue like a snake while reciting an incomprehensible language, mimicking the priest's Latin prayers. He would hum opera solos in a falsetto voice, while flecks of blood resembling claw marks would suddenly appear on his body. The following day, Douglas would never have any memory of the night's events. One night he awoke and started scribbling letters on his bed sheets. When asked his name, as prescribed by the exorcism ritual, the voice replied that he will answer to the name of Spite, and also, I am the devil himself. Markings continued to appear on Douglas's body, in particular the number 18 and letter X. The being then said through him in a deep guttural voice, I will not depart until a certain word is pronounced. This boy will never utter it. The priests never found out the word until the very end, while the demon continued to toy with them, showing off his powers. I can wake him up when I wish, he told them. Douglas woke up. And I can cause him to sleep. The boy immediately dozed off. Although Halloran's nose was broken as Douglas thrashed about, the priest says he was never afraid. He was too busy doing the task at hand, he said, while those feelings of terror and disbelief came later. With efforts seeming fruitless, fears were growing that Douglas would waste away, so he was then moved to the Alexian Brothers Hospital in St. Louis. Fortuitously, just before Easter, in the midst of the usual hate-filled ravings, a strong, deep voice arose from within the boy. The voice identified itself as that of the Archangel Michael, who then spoke the word that freed Douglas. It was Dominus, which is the Latin for Christ. A massive crash thundered around the hospital, and Douglas, suddenly looking alert but questioning, asked, "Where am I?" He was completely unaware of what had oppressed him for so long, and was soon able to be discharged from hospital. The agonising process had taken until May 1949, but finally the spirit went away and Douglas Deen became a normal teenager again. Douglas kept in touch with Bowden over the years, and neither was again bothered by supernatural incidents. Douglas married and had a family, living a good life without any recollection of what had happened to him at the time, and unwilling to speak of the events. But he did name his son Michael after the archangel he believed finally dispatched his tormentor. In the 1973 film, Bowden became Father Merrin and was played by Max von Sydow. The strenuous efforts of the exorcism changed him permanently, depleting his energy and leaving him thin and wasted. His brother Edward, who was a doctor, explained that throughout the ordeal, Bowden fasted on bread and water. He finally passed away in 1983, aged 85. Halloran later became an army chaplain. His real-life experience was just as disturbing as the film that shocked audiences 50 years ago, on which he commented that it glitzed up reality a bit. However, he's quoted as saying in his 1998 interview that he decided to speak out to confirm that the exorcism did take place, lest the fantasy take over. The then 77-year-old priest said that he still believes Douglas's was a genuine case of possession and highlighted the fact that evil does exist in the world. He was 83 when he passed in 2005. The third priest involved in the exorcism, Father Paul Raynott, is also no longer with us, but he always made his views clear that there was no doubt it was a possession. He described the Deens as intelligent and very sensible, honest people who had no reason to want to exaggerate. The film The Exorcist was based on writer and director William Peter Blatty's best-selling novel. Blatty had read a diary Bowden kept on the exorcism when he was studying at Georgetown University, and also had no doubt that Douglas Deen was possessed by demons. He commented that the brandings appeared on the boy's skin as many as 30 times a day and were unquestionably paranormal. The diary recorded how droplets of blood would suddenly materialise, while Bowden watched a tiny, almost invisible network of lines travel from under the boy's inner upper thigh and descend all the way to his ankle, creating the red droplets. Both the Dean's house and also the hospital where the exorcism was conducted have been bulldozed. However, to this day, students at St. Louis University report that the windows are always broken in a room where Douglas once lay. According to one ex-student, the glass shatters every time they attempt to replace them.